A high school senior named A. Min Lee disappeared one day after school in 1999 in Baltimore County, Maryland. A month later, her body was found in a park, a city park named Lincoln Park. She'd been strangled. Her 17-year-old ex-boyfriend, Adnan Syed, was arrested for the crime, and within a year, he was sentenced to life in prison. The case against him was largely based on the story of one witness, Adnan's friend named Jay, who testifies that he helped Adnan bury Hay's body. However, Adnan has always maintained that he had nothing to do with Hay's death. Some people believe he's telling the truth, but many others don't. Sarah Koenig sorted through thousands of documents, listened to trial testimony and police interrogations, and even talked to everyone she could to remember what happened between Adnan Syed and Hayman Lee. She discovered that the trial covered up a far more complicated story than the jury or the public ever got to hear. From the high school scene, to the shifting statements, to police, to prejudices, to sketchy alibis, the scant forensic evidence, all of it leads back to the same two questions. How can you tell a person's character? How do you know what they're capable of? In season 1 of Serial, Sarah searches for answers. Today is Friday, May 3rd, on Serial. I mean, the only evidence that's currently against Adnan is the fact that Jay knew where Hay's car was. And also, the cell phone records that they used to convict Adnan were not used right. It is explained in the last episode of Serial that the 230 call could have been a butt dial, considering the fact that in the trial, they say that the 236 call is the "Hey, come get me, I'm at Best Buy" call. But that ended up lasting well over what was considered to be a reasonable amount of time, and was interpreted as the "Hey, come get me" call. But in all reality, it very well could have been a butt dial. So we don't know what was said on that call, or even if it was a call. You know? Like, that means that this evidence just has to be ruled out, because if you don't know what was said on that call, we can't convict a man of murder. Which means that Jay's story just has to be false. Or it could mean that Jay's story just isn't true, or that he's lying. What I'm saying is, there's not enough evidence to convict Adnan. The only evidence that we have is Jay's story, and if Jay isn't telling the whole truth, then he must be leaving something out that is crucial to convicting Adnan of murder or proving his innocence. All I'm saying is that there's not enough evidence currently in our possession that can convict Adnan of murder. So I set out to find what the story could have been. And by doing that, I had to look at some characters that just were not analyzed correctly. Because after the detectives had the idea that Adnan could have been the killer, they really zeroed in on him and pretty much focused all their attention on him and pretty much gave up on the rest. I mean, they did interview Jay a little bit. However, all they did with him was just trust him as a witness, because he knew where Hay's car was, which made them think that he was telling the entire truth, when in reality, we don't know how much of his truth is true, or how much is a lie. But the entire case against Adnan is based off of Jay. Is he funny enough, as of me speaking right now? I've come across evidence that Jay actually has been proven to have lied multiple times about what he said. And so there was more evidence about what Jay said, but after going over what had been proven false and what had been proven true, all that's true is that he knew where his body was, and so that's what the authorities went off of to think that he was talking about the truth. One major character that does need to be re-examined, or just examined in general, is Bilal. You see, Bilal was the youth mosque leader. He was tasked with connecting with the younger generations and really becoming their friend and proving to them what is right through religion, right? Like any youth leader, right? But Bilal did get exposed as to buying hotel rooms for Hay and Adnan to do teenager things, right? So it's not completely unreasonable to assume that Bilal had something to do with this murder. Now, I'm not saying that Bilal did the murder. I'm not saying that he killed Hay at all, because once again, you need some sort of motive, right? Bilal never really had any motive to kill Hay. But what I'm saying is that Adnan knew Bilal as a friend, and he wasn't examined or questioned at all. And he very well could have used Bilal to hide the body or hide evidence or something. I'm going to use Bilal's character as a connection to the mosque, because the mosque actually plays a pretty big role in this entire case, right? Mr. S, who's the first character we meet in the story, chronologically, he is the person who spots the body in Lincoln Park, right? But what's crazy to me is that his boss is also the leader of the mosque. So you gotta think, is there any reason or any possibility that Mr. S could be linked to the crime? Now, the mosque itself isn't at all linked to the crime, but it's the fact that people are all conjoined together and know each other and have connections through the mosque, right? When you're a part of a church or any religious group, people help each other, you know? They know each other. Like, if there's a deed that needs to be done, people in a church, this doesn't just go with the mosque, this goes for any kind of religion, any kind of church. People will always try to help you if it's for the sake of religion. So just to go out on a whim, Mr. S very well could have more to do with this whole case, or just that he could be used as a person who would be able to spot a body if he was connected to an even bigger plan, you know? Like, so there definitely needs to be, or should have been, more research done back when this happened on Mr. S and the mosque and the people at the mosque, right? The fact that Bilal and Mr. X are both united through the mosque, it really seems like something could have gone through based off of the connection with the mosque, which means that someone else who maybe did actually do the crime could have done that, you know, or could have been a part of the mosque. But moving back to Bilal, right? Bilal helped Adnan and Hay, you know, as teenagers, right? But Aisha, Hay's best friend at the time, testified that Adnan and Hay had pregnancy scares in the past, right? And so it's not completely outrageous to assume that Bilal helped with the pregnancy scares. Either it's helping them get to a doctor or something that could have brought Hay, Adnan, and Bilal's friendship together to get them to trust each other, right? So let's say Adnan did do it. If he hid the body, and if he did actually do it, he most likely would have gone to Bilal for help, and Bilal would have helped him because that's the kind of person that Bilal was to Adnan. segment, I would like to bring up Don. You see, Don is Lee's new boyfriend. They officially started dating on January 1st of the year 2000, but they had been talking before, right? They had been working together. Adnan and Don met, but not as the new boyfriend yet. And Don didn't necessarily have any motive to kill Hay, but there wasn't very much research done on Don, right? But what's funny is Don did actually have an ex-girlfriend at the time who he broke up with to get with Hay. There is absolutely zero information, zero suspicion, zero research done on Don's old girlfriend, right? And this isn't anything new, but the old girlfriend could have came and killed the new girlfriend, right? So that's just another suspicion that could have happened, right? You see, Don worked at Hay's work, right? And he is very suspicious. He isn't very researched after he goes missing, right? So he doesn't call Hay, he doesn't acknowledge Hay's existence or her disappearing, right? So that's pretty unusual considering that's your girlfriend. So it's not completely unreasonable to assume that Don had something to do with this because he didn't even call Hay when she went missing. He says that he thought that Hay went to her relative's house and just didn't call him or anything. But as a boyfriend, normally a boyfriend would call if his girlfriend went missing, right? He would be concerned, at least the slightest bit. So that's going to conclude our last segment on Don. Don was the boyfriend, or the new boyfriend of Hay after she went missing, and she really, wasn't really contacted or anything by him. So Don was a little bit suspicious. There needs to be more research. Same thing with Don's girlfriend, or his ex-girlfriend at the time. However, to wrap up this episode, I would like to talk about the few things that we've talked about so far. Number one, the cell phone records were not used right. I was explaining earlier, they proved that it could have been a butt dial, or it could not have been, therefore it's not actual evidence against Adnan. It's just the fact that the phone rang. That's not really evidence against Adnan, right? So they ended up going with Jay's story, which ended up only being proven somewhat true because Jay knew where the car was, specifically Hay's car, right? So that's why it makes sense for them to believe that Jay is telling the truth. However, that's the only thing he did know, so he could be making the rest up. Bilal needs to be researched. He's had problems and he's helped Adnan with trouble in the past, so it's not unreasonable to assume that he helped Adnan with the murder of Haim and Lee. And then we also need to discuss Mr. S because he's associated with the mosque and has a indirect connection with Adnan. So they need to start talking about him, how his boss was the leader of the mosque. And then Aisha, Hay's best friend at the time, testifying that there were pregnancy scares, so maybe Bilal could have helped Adnan, once again wrapping this back up to Adnan. And then Don being suspicious, along with no evidence about Don's old girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend. They don't even talk to her, they don't even mention her, we don't even know who this is, right? So, to wrap things up, I would like to state that there needs to be more research done. This is just not fair for Adnan. He got out about a year ago, and due to lack of evidence, and there needs to be more evidence if we need to find who actually killed Haim Lee. This story reflects how the government needs to do more research before convicting felons. In Louisiana specifically, there's a very high incarceration rate, and the government needs to do a better job of protecting its citizens from false imprisonment. This case is a mess, and there's not really anything that could help us solve it, But what I will say is that the only things that would to help us solve it is the answer of two questions. How can you know a person's character? And how do you know what they're capable of? This is Thursday, May 9th, 2024. Thank you for listening.